Hello everyone and welcome to my coloring corner. Today is Fun Stuff Friday and we've got some new fun stuff to play with. This is transparency film. It is a clear product that you can put through your inkjet printers and print your pictures on it. Now you have to be careful what you use on the transparency. It does have a film on the back. So when you get your package, you'll get this wonderful package of film, but inside you'll also get this information sheet, which tells you how to print it, which way to remove the paper out of the package so that you know you're printing on the right side. If you print on the wrong side, it will wipe right off. I know this from experience. I did print it on the wrong side and it did wipe right off. Print your picture, let it dry. It says it only takes a few minutes to dry. I left my first picture for 15-20 minutes. Colored the picture, didn't like a couple of areas that I had colored, so I thought, well, this is just water-based paint, so I'll just take a damp cloth and wipe it off. Wiped off the whole picture. Because it wasn't completely dry. So be careful, let it dry completely. It says to allow the prints to dry for 5 to 15 minutes. I would expect you to need to let it to dry for at least 3 or 4 hours. I would print it the night before, let it sit overnight just to get a good adhesion of the ink to the transparency. I have left this one, oops, sorry. I have left this one for a week, well, about 3 days, and it doesn't wipe off. I can rub it, it doesn't wipe off. So as long as you can put a water-based product over top of it and not have it wipe off, you're good to go. Now, all the wonderful things that we can do with this. So if you are a mandala lover, this is for you, especially if you enjoy having window clings and things like that, because you can tape this to your window and make a beautiful stained glass window with it. You just have to, it is a little bit tricky and it takes a little while to get used to filling in all of the little bits, but I'm pretty sure that as soon as you get the understanding of which way you need to go with your pen and that sort of thing, you guys that do mandalas could make some beautiful, beautiful window art. So now for the things that I've used on this one. I have used, let's move the transparency over, when you take it out of the package, let's do that first. When you take it out of the package, the part that you print is in the front. So if you take it from the back, make sure that you don't lose track of which way it was facing in the package. So it comes with these wonderful little sheets in between. So, and when you feel it, it feels a little different on the back. Like the front feels like a smooth plastic. On the back it feels a little tacky. And on the back, that tacky feeling is the part that you will put in the printer to print on. So you put it in the printer this way. When you take it out of the package, make sure that the back is covered with the paper. It's just a little see-through paper, a little bit of wax paper, parchment paper, whatever you want to call it. Put this in the printer by itself in the direction that you can feel the tacky difference in the on the transparency. If you pull it from the front, just make sure that you pull it from the direction, like if you pull it from the front here, make sure whatever is facing forward is what you print on. Sorry about the light, I keep on hitting it. I have it on my light box so that I can show you what it looks like after. Just got to be careful that you don't stick it to everything. There's a sticky strip on the back that keeps the package closed, and that's what I'm getting stuck on everything. So I'm going to put this back in here and try to get it back in the package. So just make sure that when you're printing that there's a tacky feeling to the page that you put in the front of your printer so that it will print on it. If it's on the back side where it's really smooth, it will print on it, but it will smudge, it will wipe right off, and it will make a mess. Okay, now for the fun stuff. So in this information, it says there are two sides to the transparency, as I was just explaining to you. One side feels a little tacky, the other side feels really smooth. If you put your package face up, so if you put your package this way, face up, and you pull your film out, whatever is facing up should be the tacky side. They've placed the sheets in order that way so that you know which side to print on. If you have a good sense of feeling in your fingertips, you'll be able to feel the difference. Only load one transparency at a time. So when you load your printer, take all your paper out and put one sheet of the transparency in, let it print, put it aside, and then do another one if you want to do another one. The print settings are pretty much normal. Just use your normal print settings. If you are doing something like a grayscale or something like that, I haven't tried that. It does say that you can do color for screen printing and that sort of thing. I'm not sure how that is done. Use your best print quality so that you get a really good defined line and it's not wiggly or anything like that. If you have problems with it on the regular paper setting, go to a glossy paper. That will fix that. Of course, sometimes it depends upon which way, like if you're doing a mandala and stuff like that, it's not all that important. But if you're doing something like the first one I did, this one here, you may want to mirror your picture because when you paint it, you do it on the side that's tacky. But when you put it up on your window, you put it up this way. So the light is going to be coming through this part. And of course, you know, the back of the window if you've got it going inwards. So whatever area that is going to be seen is going to see it this way. So if you want it to be facing the right direction, mirror your image. That sort of thing. Now I have tried, as you can see with this one here, all different products. I'm going to take this one off so you can actually see this one. So I have used all types of products on this, and I have found that some work better than others, and some work terribly, and some work okay, so. The things that I have found that work quite well, I'm going to cover up all of the areas that I don't want the extreme light to get through to you with some paper so that you guys can see the way this is going to shine in your window. So as you can see, I've painted it. I've used acrylics, I've used watercolors, I've used Pitt pens, I've used sparkle plant pens. I have used everything. So I'm going to turn the light on. Now, as you can see, there's different areas where it looks like it didn't adhere to the paper, or that I went in different lines and things like that. I found for really large areas, the best, sorry, there we go. In really large areas, I found the best ones that I have personally are my Spectrum Noir sparkle pens. They put out a lot of ink, and you can make it go in one direction so that you get a really good solid coverage. Um, for some of the smaller areas, I've tried different products. I tried the paint markers, which are just water-based paint. I've tried the Faber-Castell Pitt pens. Not on this picture itself, but on this smaller one, I use the Pitt pens. I've tried a couple of these different fine liners as well as some gel pens. The gel pens worked okay in really, really small areas, but where you don't have to really move the pen a lot. If you have a really juicy one that you don't have to move the pen a lot, like a jelly roll or something like that, it'll work really well. But if you have a sparkle pen that even when you do it on paper you end up with lines, you're going to get a lot of lines here and you're going to see them. So as you can see, when you go over an area, if you continue to go over an area too much, you could end up with removal of the paint and removal of the film. So once you've removed that film that's on the backside, you can't really fix that. So you have to be very careful on what you're removing. Sorry guys, I gotta turn that back off so I can show you. For example, up in this area here, I have removed a bit of the film and it went all tacky and yucky. But all in all, it took about 3 days for this to dry to a point where it wasn't sticking this part here, because I put this on really, really thick so that I could get a really good coverage. The colors did blend together really well. I took different ones and blended those colors together, and that worked out really well on this sheet. Same with down here on the grass and stuff like that. The one thing that I did find is you have to be really careful when doing a large picture like that on where you're going to be putting your color, and go in one direction. Don't go back and forth, don't go in circles or anything like that. Move in one direction. Otherwise you're going to break down the film that you're coloring on, and it just becomes a little bit of a tacky mess. So we're going to color. This one here I colored with the Spectrum Noir glitter pens and the Faber-Castell Pitt pens. And it doesn't look too bad. I'm going to try to do this without blinding you, because this is of course a clear filament and it's going to shine all the way through. So I'm going to block this off so you can only see the one that I've colored. Now, one of the things that really I don't like is that the sparkles that you can probably see, let's see if I can, I'm going to put this over on the other camera for a second. I'm going to move it so you can see the sparkles. So as you can see, I've got the glitter in there, I've got the sparkles in there, and that sort of thing. But if you put a light behind it, you can't really see the sparkles. So you won't be able to see that glitter from inside. However, you may be able to see it from outside. Okay, so let's cover this all up. Switch you back over to the main camera here. So as you can see, this small one here, I'm going to turn that off, and then we'll turn this on. Let's see if I can get you a little closer. Not really. When it's lit up, it's really hard for you to see, but there's little areas when you put it up against the window or when you put it up against the light that you can actually see that you've missed. So I'm going to turn this light off because that's just pointless to y'all. But you can see that you've missed them, and when you've missed something like that, it will shine through and you can end up seeing it later on. Now I'm not going to use the pit pens today, I don't think. We will see. See how much time we have. I have a bunch of different things here that you can use that are very budget friendly. Pit pens aren't really budget friendly, so I'm trying to keep it as budget friendly as possible for an experimentation product. And once you're done experimenting with it, if you really enjoy using it, of course, go on to whatever product you find works the best with it. These are just basic fine liners, really cheapo. I can't even remember where I got them type of fine liners. These are Studio Color, just small little mini markers, and they seem to work pretty good. This, of course, is the Poetique brush watercolor pens, and of course the Spectrum Noir glitter pens work really well as well. I do have well, I guess I could just grab a couple of pit pens too, just to show you the best way to use them. I have the chunky one here, and of course I have my whole pit pen set. So I'll grab a skinny one. So we have this one here. So the difference between the really chunky and the skinny ones is the size of the pen, like the size of the nib. So you can see a huge difference in the nibs of the chunky. And this is called the big brush. And this one here is just a regular pit pen. So you can definitely use those. The little ones I like to use on these really, really small mandalas. This page was printed from favecrafts.com, and the artist is Maria from World of Magnifica .eu. Okay, so what you do first, of course, is you print your picture. You can put it on a white sheet of paper so that you can see where you're putting your ink, or you can of course put it on a light board so that you can see what light is coming through, or you can put it on your table or whatever, depending upon what color of a background you have. Will give you a better idea of where you're putting your color. I find white helps me a lot because I use a lot of bright colors, and with yellow on top of blue or whatnot, it changes the color a bit and freaks you out. Just a heads up. Okay, so let's start. Let's unplug this because I don't want it turning on every time I touch it. Let's start here above the one that we've already done. This is just a basic fine liner, and I'm going to turn this light on so I can see what I'm doing. I'm try to keep it down a little bit so that you guys aren't blinded by it. And then we'll just fill in little areas. Now, one of the things that I have found that works really well in getting the color down as well as keeping that film in place, is just little dots and just a little bit of movement, not a huge back and forth. Like if you do this, it'll hold it for a certain percentage of time. But as soon as it's wet and you try to go back over it, you're going to end up losing the filament or the adhesion below. So when you go over something like this in a large area like this, so as you can see, if I keep on going over it, it just keeps on getting more and more and more lines. So if you're doing a small thing like this, not a huge ordeal, but if you're doing something really, really big, go one direction, let it dry, come back later and go back over it in the opposite direction and fill in all of that line, because you are going to get some little lines. Same with small ones. Take a look after you're done to see what kind of light is coming through, and go back over it and cover up whatever light you're seeing. Now this is a really, really small one, so I'm going to switch you over to the close-up camera so you can see a little bit better. And I'm going to block that light so that you're not getting a lot of light reflection. Try not to touch ones that are drying because you will lift the ink up. So if you have an area that's drying, walk away, let it completely dry, turn the page, make sure that your hand isn't going to go on it and put moisture back in it from your hand, because that too will make it pick up. So if you've got a large area, of course, start in the middle and work your way out, let it dry, and then come back in and work on it some more. But if you touch it while it's wet, you will lose your ink. Okay, so this is just with a pit pen, or not a pit pen, a fine liner. We've done the little dots here. Okay, now I'm going to do a larger area so you can see what I mean. Oh, I missed a couple of little dots. I missed some dots. And see, that's what I mean. Is, with it being see-through like it is, you can easily miss things. So, of course, you can just go over it and fix it. But okay. And then we're going to grab some greens and do the leaves here. So I'm going to show you what I mean by when you go over something with a certain color. And I'm going over the black, and my black should be dry enough now that I can do this without lifting it off. Now, one of the things with this that you will find is you can color over that black with something like an acrylic paint pen or a metallic paint pen and not see the lines on this side. However, when you flip it over, you can still see those black lines. Now I'm going to blend that with a lighter green, and I'm just going into it and dragging it out with that lighter green the same way you would do on paper, but I'm just trying to put small little strokes all in the same direction, not back and forth. And then what I will do when I come back is I will go back through and cover up any areas that I may have missed or that the little strokes have caused lines or things like that. Now it's a really rainy, nasty day here, so putting it up against the window isn't going to help any. But you could, put this up against a window and color it that way as well, so that you can see what it's going to look like with the sun going through it or that sort of thing. I am not very good with mandalas, so this is one of those things that I'm not fantastic with, but I have seen so many really, really, really beautiful, beautiful mandalas that you guys put out, and I think they would make absolutely gorgeous stained glass windows. So if you could, and you enjoy that sort of thing, if you could do it on a piece of paper that basically you can just put up to your window later and get that stained glass illusion with your art, that's really, really cool. And of course, you can definitely use this for any of your larger pictures. You just have to be careful um, when you're going through and adding paint to make sure that it's something that covers really well and quickly. And make sure you don't go over and over and over it. Because if you do go over and over and over it um, all at once while it's still wet, you're going to end up losing that adhesion, that surface that they've put on the plastic. Alcohol markers do not work on this. I did try, and they don't work on it at all. Um, they do lift that. Basically, it dissolves whatever it is that they've coated this with that is holding on to that ink or paint, depending upon what you're using on it. It does, acrylic markers do work on it pretty good, but like I said, you end up covering the lines a bit, and when you cover up the lines, even if you paint over top of it, you're still going to see that line through. Um, but it really concerned me and confused me while I was coloring where all the lines went, because I kept on going over them and not seeing them. Where on paper, if you go over the lines, you can still see them, but because these are so thin and not a huge ridge of ink like it is on paper, it makes it a little bit more difficult to see them when you go over top of them. But as you can see, it does color quite nicely. And it does look really cool. And I think, once summer hits and we get all that sunshine coming through the windows, it's going to make a really, really interesting window. End up coloring all my pictures in on these and putting them in the windows. I am not fantastic with these pens or watercolor at all, but I saw this and I thought that is really cool. And I thought of all of you wonderful people that do those absolutely gorgeous mandalas and how pretty that would be in windows. I wish I would have found this a little bit earlier um, last year, when we were in the height of the pandemic and all of our seniors were being held in their care homes without the ability to see people, because then it would have made sorry, trying to make that a little bit bigger for you so you can see. It would have made having them all have really pretty windows, because you can stick it to the outside of the window. You don't even have to go in. You just take it to your mom or dad and tape it to the outside of the window, and they can see your beautiful work through the window. Make things really pretty for them. That would have been really cool. And as you can see, the first coat, some colors are going to need 2 or 3 coats just because they're really, really light. I think everything is going to need at least 2 coats, just so that you can get any areas that you missed, or any areas that have little lines in it from the motion of the pen, that sort of thing. Now I'm going to try to do the inside with as little color or motion as possible, because there's larger areas in there. It could be proved to be a little bit more difficult. So let's try and not mess it up. So let's take some really pretty pink colors. I think I've got a couple. Yeah, I've got pink. And you've got a bright light in your face again. Sorry. So what I was saying about going over the lines is you can go over the lines. Just be really careful when you do, especially with a wet medium like a watercolor ink or a watercolor paint, because it will pick up the ink if you get it too wet. Basically what would happen is the stuff that they put on the back of the transparency to hold the ink gets saturated and then starts to lift off. But if you do it the right way and let it dry, it won't do that, which is so cool. And I'll flip it over and I'll show you after. I'll try to show you without touching it what I mean by you can draw over it and still have those lines show through on the other side. Just have to be really careful going over the lines. Make sure that you don't put too much moisture there. Make sure that you don't put a lot of pressure or rub, like don't scrub your pen across the line, because it will pick that ink up and move it, especially if you don't let it dry for a long period of time. If you've only let it dry for a few minutes, like it says 5 to 15 minutes, just coloring over those lines, you're going to see movement in that ink, because I don't think 5 to 15 minutes is long enough, personally. But that's just my printer, so everybody's printer is different. They do have some made specifically for LaserJet printers. This will not work in a LaserJet printer. This is made specifically for inkjet printers. So if you have a LaserJet printer, please look for the filament or the transparency that is made specifically for your LaserJet printer, because this one will not work in it. it's just so cool. And of course I will go over it again at another time to um, clean up any spots or anything like that. But as you can see on the back side here, you can still see all of the lines and all of the boo-boos. I'm not putting it all the way down to the mat because it's wet and it'll stick. Now I'm going to show you with a pit pen. This is a metallic pit pen, and with the metallics I found that they cover really well everything. So if you go over a black line, it's going to cover that black line up. However, on the other side, you're still going to be able to see that black line. I'm trying to concentrate on. It's hard to talk when you're sticking your tongue out of your mouth trying to concentrate. Get the pen in the right place. And try to keep the light out of your guys' face and still have it on so I can see. And I'll show you with this as well how you can see those lines on the other side of the page after I'm finished with this part. Just have to be really careful that you go in one direction. Don't do little circles, just little tiny strokes, and try to go in the same direction. Almost messed it up there. If you change directions, just try to go back over it just gently with your pen. With these metallic pens, it's a lot easier to redirect because they cover so much more and they're not as see-through. But even with the pit pens, it's something that is, the ink is thinner, so you end up seeing through it. With this, it's not as clear, so it's a lot easier to redirect that flow. But it does take longer for these to dry. Okay, so as you can see on this side, you can still see all of those lines even if I went over a couple of them. Cover that up. There we go. Okay, so let's do the center area in a paint pen here. I was going to try to do them all with different things, but maybe I'll just use the yellow and we'll move on to the next one with a different color. So we want to do the orange and then the yellow. I tried to make them all really small so that we could get through them, but it's taking longer than I expected. I don't want to spend 30 minutes per little coloring because, yeah, who wants to sit and watch me color for 30 minutes? Well, for, 2-3 hours talking about what pens are best to use on it. So far, I'm really liking these fine liners on it. Fine liners seem to work really well. The pit pens worked okay. I had to dab with the pit pens. And I find that the paint markers work really well too. The watercolor paint markers, the brush pens, that works really, really well too. If you find that you're seeing a little bit of black from your lines coming out in your color, let it dry for a little while. It's the ink is still too wet. And you're picking up ink. Also, if you find that your pen just stops working after a little bit, give it a wipe on a piece of paper, because what's happening is it's picking up a slight bit of that film. That is giving you the ability to color. Like I said, if you do this on the other side, it will wipe right off. So the best way to know that you're actually coloring on the right side is when the color actually lays down and it doesn't puddle. Because if you're doing it on the wrong side, it will just puddle, make a big old mess. Now I gotta leave that dry before I go through and fix it. I was gonna go through and fix it, and I know what's gonna happen if I do that. Now I'm gonna color these here a nice yellow, and then I'm gonna show you something that I figured out along the way. I don't know if I can show it to you, if you can actually see it very well. With the camera, but hopefully you can. So I've colored those with a yellow, and now I'm gonna just let that dry for a little tiny bit, and then I'm gonna take the gold Pitt pen and I'm gonna color this whole thing in right over top of all the lines and everything. Now I'm just doing little tiny dots, and right over top of that yellow and everything. And hopefully I've given it enough time to dry. Now, when you do this, it doesn't look all that pretty on the color side, on the side that you're coloring. So if you want it to look pretty on both sides, don't do this. But as you can see, the Pitt pen is covering up all of the lines, all of the little doodads, the center lines and all that stuff. And I'm doing this very quickly, so there's going to be little spots that I haven't covered. And I will go through later and fix it. So as you can see, I've got most of it covered. You can still see bits of the black come through from areas that I've missed. And now it's a bit tacky, like sticky tacky, not ugly tacky. So you have to let this dry before you fix it any further. Otherwise, you're going to lift everything that you just put down. But yeah, I didn't let that yellow dry fast enough, long enough. So if I almost did it. So as you can see all of that detail underneath the gold, but I didn't let it dry fast enough or long enough to have that white or that yellow that I put in the center areas come through. So I will have to not do that again. I'll have to fix that later, or well, there's not really any fixing it. I can maybe wipe it off and try to make sure that it sticks. But if you allow it to dry, like for example, see these areas here, I use the metallic markers in all of these areas, and I let it dry before I went anywhere near it with anything else. And all of the different areas still show all of their lines and everything else. But if you look at the back, you can't see the lines from this area or this area or these areas. And that's just because I went through and colored straight over top of them. Okay, so let's take a look at the next one here. And we're going to do this one. Oh, see, that's what happens if you touch it, because it's still wet. So touching it is causing a problem. Okay, so let's just go to there. So you can see the moisture in that one still. So this one we're going to color with paint, the Poetic paint brushes. And let's choose a couple of colors here. Purple, red, and orange. I know, strange colors, but they'll be nice. Okay, so start in your area. You can start in your center and try to make sure that you go in one direction. Don't go back and forth. Just go in one direction. Now, as you can see, the paint markers seem to pick up a little bit more of that black ink, and I'm not sure if it's because it has more moisture or if my hand has heated up that area. So with your paint markers or your paint pens, try to make sure that you put as little paint as possible over that black area. And once again, you may get little lines. You can come back through later after it's fully dry and fix those lines. Now what I did over there is I just took the paint marker and I brushed it on the paper to remove any of that black that I had picked up. You will definitely see if your ink is running a bit, because you'll get these little black smudges in your coloring, but you'll also see a black residue on your paintbrush. And I'm going to end up in trouble there because I keep on doing little tiny strokes instead of large strokes. The less amount of agitation on the filament, the better. So if you can do very little agitation on it, the better it is. But as you can see, these paint pens cover really nicely and get a very good color definition. And for larger areas or larger pictures, as long as you remember to try to stay going in the same direction in continuous strokes without going back and forth over it, it should do very well. Like I said, the more you agitate it with the moisture and the brush, the more you may find that your paint is picking up because it's rubbing that surface off. Okay, so, and what I wanted to show you, I know wasn't sure if I was going to show you the pit pens, and I'm still not positive I'm going to do that. One of the reasons why I wanted to show you as many of the budget-friendly things as possible, as I said before, is to keep it feasible to do the experimentation, so that you can take as many of these low-cost things that you may already have in your house and try it first. The pages is about $20 for 30 pages. And I'm going to end up in trouble here too because I keep on going over and over and over it, and it's going to lift up all of that stuff. And I know this, and I still do it. Isn't that a glutton for punishment? Okay, so in the areas that you're actually going to go over top of the black, be very, 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 very gentle. Make sure that you stay in one direction. Don't drag it back and forth, and try to put as much as little of the tip of your brush on the page as possible, because it will pick up that black color, and if you're using a light color, you will find that it loses its brightness. Of course, you can come back over it later on after it's dry and give it that depth of color that you want it to have, or to add. Another thing that I have found with these is if you want to blend colors together, of course that is up to you, and it is something that is done best when it's wet. And in the stroke positioning, like I'll show you on a different sheet or on the edges of this sheet. In just a moment here. Okay. Alright, and as you can see, there's areas, of course, that I've missed, or this area here where you can see the light coming through or the white coming through of your page underneath. Just go back over it. Just be really gentle when you go back over it to make sure that you don't lift up the black. And as I said before, even if you go over the black, like you can see on the back side here, that you can still see all that black through it. You can still see the lines. Now, let's do a bit of blending here. Grab the yellow one. Um, this one here is very yellow. Okay, so we're going to blend a little bit. So take both of your caps off so that you have the ability to move back and forth fairly quickly. Bring your color down. And like I said, with lighter colors, you're going to find it harder to see, especially against lighter things. And just bring that together. Sorry about that. Bring that together. Come back over it with your lighter color, bringing those two colors together. Just be very, very gentle. Try not to agitate too bad, and try to go in one direction like that. Of course, use your page to wipe any excess color off and then move on to the next one. You can of course come through later on after that's dried and go over it. So you just go through, add your color, and take your darker color, go back into it. And then add that lighter color again. And just barely agitate it, but give it enough ink there to blend that edge and bring those two colors together. Now if you find that you've got too much of the one color the darker color in your light, you can of course wipe that off, or you can leave it be. Try to go in one motion, one direction. And then of course move on to the next one. If you find later on that you've put too much yellow in an area or too much orange in an area, you can of course wait until it dries and touch it up. And it seems to blend quite nicely on there, which is really cool. I'm really enjoying the paint pens on it. It doesn't seem to be as finicky, and that may be because there's a very soft surface that, I went the wrong way. A very soft surface that you're using to move the material instead of a harder nib like surface. Even the pit pens don't seem to do as well as this paint pen is doing, which is really kind of cool. And the paint pens seem to go up quite a bit quicker too, which is also pretty cool. Just be very careful. And once you get a feel for it, you could probably do it quite quickly. Um, but just as you're feeling your way, figure out what's best for you and what's best for the page, for the material, and go for it. Experiment, play with it. I haven't even played with this yet with stickles or anything like that. Play with it. Figure out what you can do with it and that sort of thing. Make beautiful things to put on your windows to, brighten your day with. Decorate your car. Bring your art with you. Now, they do say that this is used for what was the word? Screen printing. You can do it in color and use it for screen printing. I don't know how to do that. I tried to look it up and I didn't see a lot of information on it. So if you do screen printing, maybe you know a little bit more about it than I can tell you. So if you do that, please send me a comment in the comment section below and let me know how that is done or where to look to get that information, because that may be something really interesting to try. I'm always good with trying things and learning new things, so. And this seems to be working quite well. It's very pretty. Oh, but these paint pens seem to be working very, very nicely. And I figured they probably would work really, really well for this because the um, Spectrum Noir glitter pens are just basically a paint marker. Their nibs are very soft and paint-like, paintbrush-like, I guess. As you can see, I'm getting a little bit braver with the agitation. Just be careful. It does have a tendency to lift up, but I think with the paint, it's being a little bit more forgiving. And covering a lot nicer. But we won't know that until it's dry and you can put it up against something. But it does seem to be going a little bit quicker with the paint marker, and I have a little bit more control and a little bit more forgiveness for agitation. Like if I was to agitate like this with a whatever this pen is, it may not give me that. It'll give me a lot more lines than I want and not be as forgiving with that agitation. If that makes sense. All right. I have a bit of a snuffle up on my nose, so I hope you guys aren't hearing a horrible whistle. That would not be good. And if you are, I'm really sorry. I just thought of it because I went to breathe in and I could hear a little bit of a whistle, and it's like, oh no, I hope you haven't been having to listen to that this whole time. I hate it when I get the sniffles, especially when I have to be on mic. Now I'm just trying to make sure that the light isn't blinding y'all, but still where I can see what I'm doing. I managed to get a bit of black on there, so. The one thing that I do notice with these watercolor markers, watercolor paint pens, is even though they do um, really, really well with blending the colors and that sort of thing, they do seem to pick up a little bit of that black from your printer ink, a little more than say the fine liners or the Pitt pens or the sparkle pens, the Spectrum Noir pens. So be very careful when coming up to a line. Come up to a line or drag down to a line, but don't draw like from the line out. Otherwise you're going to end up dragging that black. If you do see that especially if you're using a lighter color, you'll see it a little bit more. If you see that your tip of your brush is starting to get a little dark, just wipe it off on a spare piece of paper and it cleans it right up. Okay, so those are done. Now let's switch to something else, because obviously these paint markers work really, really well. But let's add a little bit of sparkle. And we're going to take our sparkle pens and we're just going to fill in the rest of the area with a bit of sparkle if I can get the package open. Alright, so let's take a look. What colors do we have there? So we've got purple, red, and orange and yellow. So let's do a little bit of pinks up here. Now this is a very, 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 very light color. So you may not see a lot of color until you start getting a good puddle of ink on there. Try not to let it get really, really puddly, like this one is really puddly, because it takes a long time to dry. So put it down, even if it looks really, really thin or doesn't look like you have any color down at all. Just let it dry, go back over it until you get to the color that you want it to be, because it will cause some issues if you get too much down at once. And as you all know, with these pens, you don't have a whole lot of control of what comes out, especially when you're going back and forth. Okay. So we've got some pretty orange. And we might end up with a barking dog here in a second. There might be somebody coming up to the door. But I think if I know I think I know who it is, and he shouldn't ring the bell. He should just pick up what is on the porch and go away. So as you can see, with this one especially, because this is fairly clear. You can see when I go over those lines, it picks up some of that line. So be very, very careful with this type of pen. Oh, there she goes. Well, he didn't ring the bell at least. She's just being barky. She just heard somebody out there, so she decided, well, I'm supposed to bark at this. sometimes she sometimes she just doesn't. Sometimes she just sits there and looks at the door. Sits there going, yeah, I'm supposed to bark at this, I think. I don't want to. It was just Amazon taking a package away. But so with the Sparkle Spectrum Noir pens, they are very, very, very liquid. So be very careful when going over lines or when it's puddling around lines or on top of lines. Try to make sure that you don't go back over top of it until it's dry. Otherwise you will have a pickup of those lines and you will lose the definition there. But if you just do it really, really gently, you can go back over it after it dries because you've got that coat on there protecting those lines already. And as long as you do it gently over and over and over again, it's just like a colored pencil and putting your layers in. It's just you have to wait for your layers to dry first before you go on to the next layer. And that's going to look a little splotchy until it dries and I can go back over it. But as you can see, it does work quite well with both the paint pens as well as the Spectrum Noir pens. I personally think the paint pens did a lot better and would probably rather use them than the Spectrum Noir pens. But for a bit of glitter and a bit of prettiness, they did pretty good. And once it dries, it'll look really nice. Okay. Well, and that is my experimentation of the day. Oh, actually, I was going to show you one other thing that you can use on these. So we're going to move down to this one here. That one needs to dry. And we're going to move on to this one down here. Make sure I cover that up. And we're just going to do a very, very quick one with these Studio Colors little tiny mini markers. Now the only thing that concerns me about the mini markers and type markers of this type is their nibs. They have a pretty big nib. So doing really, really fine areas like this one here might be a problem. Now as you can see with the nib, because I've gone back and forth, it's caused some lining. And I don't like that at all. My first instinct with a marker or that sort of thing is to soak the area, get it all blended, and let it dry. And you can't really do that with this filament, with this transparency, because it will lift off the part that you're coloring on. So be careful and reconsider your thinking on markers, like I have had to, and go in one direction and build up that color. and then let it dry, and then go back over it to get rid of any lines. Otherwise, you get a mess like I just did. Go in the same direction, get a layer on there. And then go over it again as it dries. Just make sure that it's dry before you go over it. Otherwise, you will end up lifting it off. So these are working pretty good. This is a really small area, so having a chunkier nib like this might not be the best choice for the job at this point. If you have really big ones, I chose these ones because they're small. But if you have really big ones like Sharpies or things like that, you can definitely use them if you have really large spaces. Just remember that you're going to have to put down a thin layer and then go back over it and go all in one direction. Otherwise, you're going to get lines or lifting of your adhesive surface that you're actually the colors adhering to. So this isn't working too bad. I think this would work too. I didn't do a lot of experimentation with these because I completely forgot I had them, to be honest. But I did try with the alcohol markers, and what a mess. Yeah, that doesn't work at all. Just so you know, the alcohol markers are not going to get you anywhere. So as you can see, the first layer is a bit of a mess, and I'm trying to go a little bit quicker here just to get the color on the page for you so you can see how that works. And I've covered up this circle, but that's alright. But it does seem to work quite well. And you know, just get your first layer down. It may look a little messy, a little thin. Let it dry and then go back over it. These ones seem to dry a lot faster than the paint or the Spectrum Noir glitter pens, but everybody knows those are really, really wet. So the paint dries pretty quick, but not as quick as these markers seem to. Which could be good, it could be bad as well, especially if you're trying to do blends and that sort of thing. You may end up with your marker drying too quick and causing issues later, especially if you're trying to blend it. And if you go over the lines, you're going to pick up that black and move it down into your marker. I just noticed. I'm agitating this a little bit too much. And it's lifting it off a little bit, so try not to agitate it too much. Otherwise, you're going to end up with lift off. Okay, so now we're going to do the inside here. And these do seem to put down the color pretty nicely. But like I said, Make sure you don't agitate it too much. And go in the same direction. Don't go back and forth, otherwise you're going to get lines. And you can see where I've got lines because I didn't obey myself. And now I'm going to show you what's going to happen if you go over it back and forth when it's still wet. See that line where it just picked up? That's what's going to happen. If you go over it when it's still wet and you use agitation, it's going to do that. So try to be careful, and of course this pen will not stick. Once you do that, you've pretty much ruined your piece, because the pen, the part that the pen is sticking to, like the part that is making the color stay, is just a film on the project that the pen sticks to. If you remove that adhesive backing, that film, then the pen is just trying to color on plastic, and we all know what happens with that. Now, as I'm coloring a larger area with these and trying to get it to cover the entire area, I don't think large areas would be very good for these small pins, because I'm having to go over it a lot more. Excuse me. And in different directions to get it to pick up the marker, which could cause an issue. And like I said, I'm going over this a little bit quicker than I normally would to show you the different problems that could happen, as well as to show you that these little tiny markers will work if you have patience. I'm not a very patient person sometimes. But I'm also trying to show you what kind of issues will happen with this product, and it is normal. It's just a part of the product. You have to be careful with the way that you color it. You know, your directions, your agitation, what kind of material you use. If you find that your marker is no longer working, you may have a buildup of the adhesive on your marker from going back and forth. And this is one of those reasons why I think that the paint pens, the Poetique or any other brush pen, watercolor brush pen, is going to work the best for this, because it gives you the ability to use large brush strokes without a lot of agitation and without friction, because these are quite hard. You know, so if you're using something quite hard, you may find that you have this issue right here. And you know, I can go over it, but if I touch it at all, I may end up with some issues. And of course, if you let it dry and just be patient with it and try to go in one direction without a lot of agitation, you should be able to get a really good smooth layer of color on there, which will look really good. But it's being patient. You have to be really patient with whatever product you choose to color these with, because that adhesive surface doesn't like being agitated. And as soon as you start agitating it, it starts peeling away from the plastic and that sort of thing. Same with if you put too much liquid on it and then try to move it, it's going to get agitated and peel away from the surface. I would not suggest using direct paint markers like paint from a pan. I think that it might have some issues with that and lift off. But these paint markers themselves seem to do very, very well. Trying to make sure I don't get too much over the lines because as you know, the paint does pick up a bit of that black. You can go over them with the acrylic quite nicely, but the liquid water paints are a bit of an issue. So let's try this one. This is a pit pen. This is a Faber-Castell pit pen, and it's a very pointy, hard nib. I did try this with the Arteza Tri markers, and they did not work well at all for the fine tip part. The paintbrush part works quite nice though. Just have to be careful. I found when I was doing another one with this Faber-Castell pen that it's best to do it in little tiny strokes or little tiny dots, especially if you're working in smaller areas, and try to not press down on the nib and just let that little bit of brush at the very tip deliver your color. This is going to adhere, well, not even adhere, stain. It's going to remain a lot better than a watercolor because it is an Indian ink. It is an ink. It's not a something that can be washed off with water. It is permanent. And it does cover really, really nicely. So, of course, another one that I do have is this one, which is a bigger nib. But as you can see, if you go over the black with it, it's going to come off. So when you go over a line like this, it is best to do dot. See if I do it in dots, instead of dragging that brush across, because that brush is a little bit harder than, say, a paintbrush. It doesn't pick up that black as much, and you don't lose your definition. You might have to go back over it again later, but you don't lose that definition. And just make sure that you wipe that off. Now, the one thing I will say about these types of pens is, just like the other one, the Spectrum Noir pen, is they're quite wet. So if you're going to use them, make sure that you be very gentle when you're touching them to the material, and give it time to dry before you go over and do any touch-ups. Otherwise, you're going to end up with the problem we had here. I know that's not the prettiest thing in the world, but that is several different products that you can use. My favorite, of course, is these Poetique brush pens. They seem to do the best with what you have. Um, let's see, take a look at the back side here and see what it looks like now that it's dry a little bit. And I like the way that it moved. I like the amount of color that is showing. Of course, I'm going to have to go over all of the areas that I use the sparkle pen in just to fill it in a bit because of the pooling. But otherwise, the way that these worked, I really, really like that. And if I leave that to dry completely, I may even be able to go over top of the areas that I've got that sparkle pen and add color to it and keep that sparkle, which would be really nice too. All right, guys, so this product, one more time, is called Paper Plan. Um, oh, goodness. Let's move some of this mess out of the way. Yeah, you guys have no idea how much of a mess my desk gets to be when I'm trying to show you things. All right, so let's flip this over so that you can see the full transparencies here. I'm going to switch you over to the main camera and turn off this light. So as you can see, this one here we did with the paint pens, the Poetique watercolor paint pens, the real brush pens. You can definitely use any type of watercolor product. I find these paint pens work the best for movement without lifting the stuff that it's adhering to. This one here is the line markers, and it does really well as well. So if you are used to using the line markers, you can definitely use those. And this one here is done with the Faber-Castell Pitt pens, as well as some of the Spectrum Noir Sparkle. I did give it some time to dry before I put more down. This one here is, of course, the Poetique with some sparkle pen. And this one here is the Studio Colors little tiny watercolor markers. I think you can use them, the Crayola ones and other things like that as well. So the product, one more time, is the Paper Plan Transparency Film, suitable for inkjet printers. You can use a standard water-based ink on it. You can use it for silk screening, crafts, overhead projectors, all sorts of things. When you pull your transparency out of the package, keep this part up. So if you're pulling out from here, whatever is pointing upwards out of the package is what goes into the printing part of your printer. So put it to the front. So if you have the ability, feel the paper, you will notice one side feels kind of sticky, not really sticky, but if you can feel the difference between the front and the back. This is the front of the paper, and as you can probably see, all of the writing is backwards because I didn't flip the image. So if you have writing on your image, make sure that you mirror your image, because whatever is pointing outwards is going to be backwards. This is the part that should point outwards. It's the prettier part. So make sure that you mirror your image if you have writing or whatnot on it. Fantastic product and so fun to play with. And I can't wait. If you guys get this, please show me all your mandalas in the windows. You guys are so good with mandalas, and I would love to see a beautiful stained glass mandala window. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. I had a great time. I know this has gone really long, but I wanted to show you all the different products that you can use on this product and the different ways that you can color on it. These are just little tiny mandalas, but you can do an entire picture. Let's move the mandala so you don't see it through her face. But you can, color an entire picture with it. Um, of course, remember to mirror your image. This one I did muck around with because I was experimenting. This is one of Heather Valentine's Patreon pictures. But, as you can see, I was able to blend colors together, put multiple colors or multiple products in one space and still get a beautiful, beautiful outcome. Um, if you are used to using gel pens, remember to use a gel pen that is really, really juicy and let it dry. Don't go back and forth over it. Do a small area, let it dry, and then move on to the next. Um, don't go back and forth. It will lift up and scrub away the adhesive backing that you are trying to get your colors to stick to. Now, I want to show you something. I put this on a piece of paper, and as you can see, um, the ink stuck to the paper because I didn't let it dry. So make sure that you let your pictures dry before you stick it to something. Otherwise, it's going to get stuck, and then it'll dry, and then you'll have to peel it off, and that won't be pretty. All right, guys, thank you all very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoyed playing with this product, and absolutely experiment. Don't just grab it and say, okay, I know how to use this. Find what works best for you. Experiment your little heart out. The reason why I did 6 to 1 on a page was to experiment, to show you different things that I have found work really well. Read the instructions. Make sure that you follow the instructions. And, if you find out a little bit more about the silk screening aspect of it, let me know. I didn't find a lot of information on the silk screening, how it could be used for silk screening. So don't run it underwater, that sort of thing. It will wash the ink off. Let it dry for 2 or 3, at least 24 hours. In my opinion, it says 5 to 15 minutes, but to me that's not long enough. I left this one to dry for multiple days, and as you could probably see as I was coloring, especially in this one, it still lifted the ink. So even after several days, I'm still getting a little bit of ink lift. Not a lot, not enough to completely erase the image, but enough to say let it dry for more than 15 minutes. Of course, like, comment, and subscribe. Leave me a comment below of the different things that you would like to see, or if you enjoyed the video, or if you have any questions or anything like that. Please leave me a comment in the comment section below. I will leave a link to the paper plan. Of course, the link will be an affiliate link. So every time you click on the link and buy something from that link, on my channel, it will be an affiliate link, so it will give me a couple of pennies towards things for the channel, whether it be content, prizes, different packages, or anything like that. Shipping and handling, things like that. I will make sure that I leave a link to all of the products that I have used on this, so that if you don't already own a product and want to know where to get it, you can definitely get it. And of course, one more final thing. I should have done it at the start of the video and I didn't think about it till now. We do have a special auction going on. So if you want to watch the video from Special Sunday, it will be on a little ad at the end of the video. So if you watch all the way to the end and go all the way through the thank you screen, you'll see little things pop up on your screen, little suggestions on different videos. One of the suggested videos in that screen is the Sunday, special Sunday video for the auction. Please watch that video, read through the about section, about the description area, and send me an email if you want to participate in the auction. It is going to be a closed auction, so this is not something that's going to be publicly viewed on the channel. So you can't just stop in and say, okay, I'm here, I want to bid. So make sure that you please, please, please watch the video and read the description area. Last but not least whatsoever, of course, is to like, comment, and subscribe. I hope you all have enjoyed this video. I know it's longer than my normal videos, and I'm probably just being way too overwinded. All right, guys, thanks a lot. Bye-bye for now.